Welcome to section 3 of the life of your dreams. This section is titled Expect. Chapter 13. Expect the spectacular. It is highly unlikely that we will achieve what we are not expecting. Those who are particular enough to view life through the spectacles of faith should always expect the spectacular. Mountains dissolve into molehills and misery will turn into miracles as long as God is at the center of our expectations. If we can believe it, we will receive it. Miracles still happen. The year 2011 will go down in history as perhaps my most adventurous year yet. I remember God speaking to me clearly at the beginning of that year to go to the nation of Zambia and do a mass healing crusade in the biggest stadium we could find. I knew it was going to be crazy, but I had no idea at the time what it would cost us to get the job done. I did not know where to start. I did not know anyone in my country who had done a gospel crusade in Zambia. And all I knew was that my cousin Angela lived there with her husband and 3 children. Because I was overwhelmed with the mandate to reach that nation, I decided to bring the whole matter to God in prayer. So I spent the entire month of February fasting and praying. As I prayed, it became clear that I was engaged in something that was much, much bigger than I ever imagined, and God was not going to let me off the hook. Still in prayer, almost audibly, I heard a voice say, "Plant a seed and I will meet your need." Now, my wife and I had applied for a loan from one of the banks to expand our consultancy, which my wife runs as a family business. The approved amount was just over $5,000 in the Ugandan equivalent. I felt the Lord nudging us to sow that money in the local currency equivalent to a ministry that was doing mass evangelism in Uganda. The Lord fell upon my pastor who had been traversing the nation, doing mass miracle crusades that often gathered up to 100,000 people. It was our fertile ground. After we sowed that seed, the man of God prophesied a double anointing upon our lives. That was February 2011. 2 months later, in April, I bought a ticket and sent a friend and co-minister of mine, Pastor Ben Isaac, to go to Lusaka and spy out the land. He came back with a positive report after 2 weeks. He assured me that we could take the land. With his encouragement, I bought a plane ticket in the month of May and flew to Lusaka. I checked into a hotel and hired a brother's rundown car to take me around the city looking at possible venues and meeting pastors. One of the pastors we met was Bishop Shifita, who graciously accepted to cushion our landing in the nation of Zambia. We settled on a date in August as the best time for the crusade, but there was one problem. The budget was prohibitive. The 3-day event was going to cost us over 100 million kwacha, almost $25,000. And we did not have that kind of money. We had never spent that kind of money on a single crusade. But I knew God had a plan. As the day approached, I felt that we needed to step out in faith with the expectation that God was going to perform miracles, even financial miracles. So in the month of July, we took the plunge. I asked Pastor Daniel, a close friend of mine, a man of great faith and with whom we had done several crusades in Uganda, to take on the role of crusade director for that mission. He graciously accepted. So we bought him a ticket to get into Lusaka. We rented a self-contained apartment for his lodging for a month and a half. I linked him up with Bishop Chifita and I waited expecting miracles to happen. Meanwhile, we had ordered a printer in Nairobi, Kenya to produce all the publicity materials that we needed for the crusade. We ordered for 50,000 A5 flyers and 20,000 A3 posters. We also placed an order for 4,000 copies of a book I had written and about 1,000 branded DVDs. The next step was to wait for the right time to have them freighted almost 2,000 kilometers to Lusaka, Zambia. We sent money, the little we had, to Bishop Shifita to book the PA system, rent the stadium, get adverts running on national TV and radio. Unfortunately, my team in Lusaka got overwhelmed by the scale of work and delayed to book the stadium for the 19th of August as we had planned. By the time they got to the stadium, the dates we wanted to book to use the stadium had already been taken by the Jehovah's Witnesses. This was a huge setback for us. It meant that we had to call Nairobi and cancel the original printing job. And since the work had already been done, it also meant that we had to pay afresh for another printing job with the new dates. I remembered swallowing hard when I got the sad news about the booking. But I was encouraged in the Lord when my wife said she could step in and help. So we quickly decided on a new date, sent the printers the new information and the extra cash to get the job done. The next challenge was to get these materials into Zambia. When all seemed set, we placed publicity materials in Nairobi on a bus destined for Dar es Salaam, the journey which takes 18 hours. A sister had to accompany them on the bus up to Dar es Salaam and then place them on a Lusaka-bound coach as cargo. The journey to Lusaka would take about 48 hours. She did just that and then spent a night in Dar es Salaam in order to make the journey to back to Nairobi the following day. While in Dar es Salaam, God gave her amazing favor with a Muslim man who offered to pay her hotel bills. He even sent his wife to bring the money and drive her to his home for breakfast. She was in for the shock of her life when she got there. The man introduced his 3 wives to her and begged her to become his 4th wife. She would have a car and a house if she accepted. Dumbfounded, she found the courage to say she needed time to think about it. However, when she left, she did not look back. She switched off her phone, and the next time he called, she was in Nairobi. Meanwhile, when the materials arrived in Lusaka, there was no one to pick them. There was a telephone number on the parcel which the courier called without success. The bus drove on to Harare in Zimbabwe with our parcel. When the bus returned to Lusaka 3 days later, they again tried the number and the number was still off. So they drove back to Dar es Salaam. It was at the 3rd attempt, nearly a week later, that they got back to Lusaka. And the courier office sought permission from their head office in Dar es Salaam to open the parcel. With that authority and clearance from security, they carefully opened the parcel and found my smiling face on the poster. There were 2 numbers on the poster, one which they called and the bishop answered. He then came and collected the parcel. We had lost a week in terms of publicity. Luckily, we had announcements running on radio and TV. There were only 10 days left at the beginning of the crusade. It was only then that I heard disturbing news that my crusade director had left Lusaka and gone to Livingstone. Apparently, he had been under intense pressure from the section of the church leaders to facilitate them before they could get on board. Having only faith and no money, he decided to give them space and disappear until the day of the crusade. Things did not look good. Even the money I had sent to help facilitate the last leg of mobilization was held by the bank. The security system. Apparently in Zambia, you cannot withdraw more than $2,000 directly from MoneyGram. It had to go through a bank account. In a panic, I sent Francis, another of my vigilant young men, a student at the university and a member of Bushenyi Miracle Center, to go and beef up the preparations in Lusaka. At home, I declared a 3-day dry fast, which, while fasting, I saw in a vision a tall black man at the back entrance of my house resisting me from getting out. He clearly did not want me to leave my house. Still in the same vision, a blazing sword appeared in my right hand, and I started to chop at the man. But my sword seemed to just bounce off him. It felt like trying to chop at a statue carved out of ebony. If you know how hard ebony is. After chopping for a while, the man suddenly disappeared without a trace. I woke up and knew God had given us victory. Francis got to Lusaka about a week before the crusade, almost at the same time as the bank decided to let go of our mobilization money. He teamed up with a few youths from Bishop Shifita's church, and they flooded the city of Lusaka with posters and flyers. He came in as a mercenary, call him a rescue emissary. His presence revived hope and got the ball rolling for the last leg of mobilization. A week later, my wife, our 7-year-old daughter, and I were en route to Lusaka, Zambia. We had a stopover in Nairobi to wind down before the hectic crusade sessions began, so we lodged at a friend's place in Westlands, a posh suburb, for 2 days. On the third day, the day before the crusade, we set off on schedule to catch a Lusaka-bound Kenya Airways flight. Although we arrived at the airport at the right time for check-in, the ground crew at the check-in counter told us we were late. The flight was already boarding. Gritting my teeth, I confronted the management, but they were less than helpful. So I picked a taxi and went back home. We had lost another 24 hours. We took the next flight, which was slated for the next day at an extra cost of $75 US. The next day in Lusaka, I almost literally stepped off the plane and hurried straight to the crusade in a panic. My host, however, could not let me. He said although we were late, we would make it because we had police escort. A lady-driven Jaguar conveyed us to Ridgeways, where we checked into the Southern Sun Hotel, a 5-star facility. I quickly showered and slid into my preaching garb, and off we went. A police-lit patrol car with a siren drove ahead of us, flashing blue and red lights as we wound through the heavy traffic. When I got onto the platform, I was still tired, but God was faithful. Many miracles happened that day. What happened in Lusaka, Zambia in the next few days still remains etched in my memory. The Woodland Stadium was filled with eager faces hungry for the word of God. Astounding miracles happened. We had people testify of being healed of cancer, HIV/AIDS. Cripples walked out of their wheelchairs. A lunatic who had lost his mind 25 years previously also got delivered. Over 3,000 people literally ran forward to give their life to Jesus. In 3 days of crusade, I share more details of the miracles that happened in this crusade in my other book, Touching the Supernatural. Just when you thought you were wiped out and the enemy had his sway, God will step in and do something that you thought was impossible. But you have to expect the spectacular. The book of Proverbs declares, surely there is a hereafter, and your expectation will not be cut off. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 18. There is no doubt about it. God seems to have placed his seal on the promise. He longs to fuel your dreams with doses of expectation. The things that we nurture will thrive. The things we do not nurture will not survive. Our future hangs on the dreams that we nurture. Much as the reality is that the vast majority of us will never live long enough to see the fulfillment of our wildest dreams, the fact remains that we can't go very far in the pursuit of our dreams until we expect something spectacular to happen. Robert Kennedy popularized George Bernard Shaw's statement when he said, while many people see things as they are and say why, I dream of things as they could be and say why not. In the Bible, the story is told of a man named Peter. He's the only man in recorded history apart from Jesus who ever walked on water. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit. And they cried out for fear, but straightway Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, bid me come to thee on the water. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? The fourth watch of the night is when sleep is sweetest and people's slumber is deepest. It's when we are we are most vulnerable and our defenses are lowest. It's when the slightest provocation invokes the greatest fear. And yet that's the time when Jesus chose to come to the disciples. He wanted to confront their fear when it was at its strongest. He wanted to appeal to their faith when it was at its weakest. When we look at things as they are, we are compelled to fear. When faith and fact are in conflict for most people, faith finds the nearest exit and fear takes the throne. Could it be the state of you? Could it be the state of your credit rating in the bank, the state of your health, or the state of your marriage that sends shivers down your spine? The things we see and experience have a way they get to us emotionally. Fear grips you in a tight embrace when the children return home with poor grades, and yet you know you have to pay for another year. You can feel the lump in your throat when an employee asks for that pay rise that you cannot afford. The hairs at the back of your head stand erect when your investment brokers bring back the bad news of when they bring back the bad news of the day's losses. You wring anxious fingers at the back of your head as you stand in line to await the results of the biopsy test. You know you are dealing with an emotional storm when your income won't leverage, your spouse won't listen, your kids won't learn, and your boss won't let you have that much needed leave. At such times, it looks like the vessel that carries your life's emotional investment threatens to go under. On the contrary, when we dream of things as they could be, we become possibility thinkers. Adrenaline rushes through our veins as we push the limits and stretch the norm to achieve some more. Our spiritual biceps bulge as we challenge the status quo and confront our comfort zones when we say, why not? Our courage soars as we stand up to tradition and embrace transition. There is melody in our hearts when we step off the boat onto the angry waters during the storm, while others whine and pine in a frantic but often futile effort to stay afloat. But there is a catch here. We can only step off the boat when we know who has called us. We can only remain optimistic and wear the cloak of the possibility thinker when we are secure in our relationship with the one who makes all things possible. We can only expect the spectacular when we are aware of the one who rules the storm. We can dare the elements when we have a personal relationship with the man who is walking on the waters. If we know who he is to us, how much he loves us, what he stands for, and what he can do in a somber situation, then we know what to expect. We can only expect the spectacular. And that's the end of chapter 13. Hold on for chapter 14.